Well, good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is Scott Manning coming to you live. Let's talk. I want to thank all of my loyal viewers for being with me here this evening. Here in the next half hour, 45 minutes or so, I'm going to be with you all night long. We're going to have a great show tonight. I've got a lot to talk about here. It is now time for the Scott Manning YouTube College Basketball Podcast Show. Tune in tonight. Please, I'll take questions, comments during the show. I would love to hear from you, and it's going to be a great show. Let's have a great night, and let's get underway. We got a lot to talk about here in about the next half hour, 45 minutes or so, and let's enjoy. Well, we start the day off on Saturday right out of the gate. Number 1, Kansas. Number 17, Villanova. Now, keep in mind, Kansas is coming off of a very close win over New Mexico State last Saturday. I mean, Kansas, they were lucky to survive that game last week. Now, let's think about this. Well, how will Kansas play this Saturday against Villanova? Now, keep in mind, the game is at Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence, so there's a little problem there for Villanova. I'll get to that in a minute. But let's think about this a minute. Dedrick Lawson, he averages 19.1 points per game. He averages 10.6 rebounds per game. He leads the team in both categories. And let's think also, too, LaGerald Vick. He's a great player, too. He averages 16.3 points per game, and he averages 71.4% from the free throw line, and he shoots 55.8% from beyond the arc. That could be huge in the game against Villanova on Saturday, or actually tomorrow. And as a team, Kansas is shooting a pretty good 37.7% from three-point land as a team. Now, the biggest Achilles heel for the Kansas Jayhawks is at the free throw line. They only average 64.2% as a team from the free throw line. That worries me, and I'm not going to lie to you. But also, too, I'm going to tell you now, it's going to be a very interesting game, and as a team, right now, with Kansas only averages 64.2%, Jayhawks need to pray that this does not turn into a free throw contest, because if it does, it's going to be a nightmare. Now, as far as Villanova goes, they are coming off of a very, very bad loss to the Penn Quakers on Wednesday night. And right now, the question is, are they still going to be hurting after getting humiliated? Now, right now, but let's think about this too. Phil Booth, he averages 15.8 points per game, and he's a very good free throw shooter at 75%. Eric Paschal, 14.5 points per game. He has 5.7 rebounds per game. He can make free throws too at 72.2%. Colin Gillespie, he may only average 11.6 points per game, but he can shoot free throws at 88. He averages 88%. But let's think about this. Wednesday night against the Penn Quakers for Villanova. Connor Gillespie, 21 points, he fouled out. Phil Booth, 15 points. Saddiq Bey, 13 points. Eric Paschal, he only had 10 points in their loss to the Villanova's loss against the Penn Quakers on Wednesday night. And right now, as a team, Villanova is shooting 72.3% at the free throw line, and they're averaging 34.3% from beyond the arc. So therefore, I'm going to tell you now, Kansas, look out. Do not get yourself into a free throw contest against Villanova, because right now, Kansas is only averaging 64.2%. The Basketball Power Index has Kansas as the favorite, obviously because they're the number 1 team in the country. But I'm going to say this now. If Kansas plays like they did against New Mexico State, they're in trouble. And if Villanova plays like they did against the Penn Quakers on Wednesday, count them out. So for right now, I'm going to cautiously go with Kansas. A lot of you guys are thinking, Scott, have you lost your kumquats or have you lost your mind? Well, I'll say this. It's going to be a crazy game tomorrow, and that's a 12 noon tip. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this game goes. Dedrick Lawson, 19.1 points per game. He leads the team with the most rebounds at 10.6. That's huge. And on the bottom line is Phil Booth, Eric Paschal, Colin Gillespie, you better step up to the plate because you're going to have Dietrich Clausen and LaGerald Vick to deal with. And if you can get, and also too, if Villanova wants to win this game, they've got to get this into a free throw contest. Because if this game's decided at the free throw line, give it to Villanova. But if it comes down to a 3-ball, give it to Kansas. So I'm going to take Kansas to win this game. And I'm not going to go any further about that at the moment because I have a lot of other things I want to talk about. All right. Now that's the 12 noon main event. But there's 2 other games. The next 2 games I'm going to talk about are part of the Crossroads Classic. And it pays tribute to the fine state of Indiana. And you know, Indiana's a basketball state, and everybody knows it. Now, let's get started with that. Notre Dame, Purdue. That's a 1:30 tip-off on CBS. Notre Dame is coming off of a very bad loss to UCLA 65-62 on Saturday night. But I'll say this, though. If Notre Dame wants to win, they got to make some improvements. TJ Gibbs, he leads the team and averaging 13.7 points per game. And he's only a 69.4%. He only averages 3.4 assists per game. And another thing that worries me is the fact he's not even a 70% free throw shooter. John Mooney, he may only average 11.6 points per game, but he does lead the team with the most rebounds with 9.7 points per game. And he's a very good free throw shooter himself. He can shoot 80% from the free throw line, and he can also shoot 52% from the field. That could be very important too. But as far as Purdue goes, Carson Edwards, look out for him. He's Mr. Dangerous. 25.5 points per game. That could be very important. He may only average 3.8 assists per game, but he's a 90% free throw shooter. If this gets into a free throw contest, if I'm Notre Dame, don't foul Carson Edwards because if he goes to the line, he's almost Mr. Automatic. Ryan Klein. We've been talking about Carson Edwards, but there's a couple of other guys that stuck out to me. Ryan Klein's another one. 13.3 points per game. And he can shoot 43.6% from the field. And he's a pretty good three-point shooter at 38.6%. That could be huge down the stretch. Evan Brodeur. I know he may only average 8.6 points per game, but he leads the team with the most rebounds at 5.1 points per game, 5.1 rebounds per game. He can shoot pretty good from the field at almost 46%. And he's a pretty good 77% free throw shooter. But here's the thing. This game is going to be fairly close. Because if you look at and I look at the numbers, people, I take a look at the team numbers, I look at everything. This one's going to be a close one. And here's why. As a team, Notre Dame shoots 41.3% from the field. That could be important. If it's a free throw contest, it will be a toss-up because Notre Dame shoots 74.1% as a team from the free throw line. Purdue, 74.7% at the free throw line. Now, Notre Dame needs to pray that this does not turn into a 3-ball contest. Because right now, Notre Dame is only shooting 31.2% from beyond the arc. Purdue, 37.1%. Now you're thinking, Scott, 31.2% and 37.1% don't sound too good. But when you're talking about the beyond the arc, that's pretty good. And considering everything, it's going to be a very interesting game on Saturday. Purdue coach Matt Painter's already said, I've got my guys ready for this game. There's going to be Notre Dame, and it's going to be a hard-fought battle. And also, too, we're coming off of a bad loss to Texas. And yes, Texas did beat Purdue in Purdue's last ball game. And you know, Notre Dame coach Mike Bree has already said, our guys will be ready. We're going to be ready for the Crossroads Classic. And the bottom line is, it's going to be very interesting to see how this game goes. Now, let's move on. Butler versus number 25, Indiana. This one here is going to be a very interesting game. For Indiana, Rafinisi, he may only average 7.4 rebounds per game, and he only has 3.5 assists. He averages only 7.4 points per game, but he averages 3.5 assists per game. He leads the team in assist. Romeo Langford. He's a very dangerous dude. 18.2 points per game and 48.8% from the field. He's only a 69% free throw shooter. That worries me. And I hope and pray for Indiana, and I'm taking the Hoosiers to win this game. I really am. But I do have some concerns, so I'll get to those in a second. Juwan Morgan. He averages 15.5 points per game. He leads the team with the most rebounds with 8.1 rebounds per game. He's only a 67% free throw shooter. So that worries me a little. And that really worries me right there. But he's also a pretty good 42 point. He averages 42 point. Wait a minute, back up here. He's only a 64.7% free throw shooter. That's not very good. But he does average 42.9% from three-point land. That could be very important in the game, too, on Saturday. And also, too, Indiana is coming off of a very hard-fought victory over Louisville. And that was a thriller. Now for Butler. And this is where it's going to get interesting. Paul Jorgensen. He averages 17.2 points per game. He's a very big guy. That could be very important, too. He shoots pretty good from the field. 44%. That could be huge down the road. And also, too, he averages 43.1% from three-point land, and he's a very, very outstanding 85% free throw shooter. Kamar Baldwin. He averages 16.6 points per game. He leads the team with the most rebounds with 6.1 rebounds per game, and he does have 4-point assists per game. And he's a very excellent 85.7% free throw shooter, too. That could be important. Sean McDermott. He averages 12.1 points per game. He's an 84.6% free throw shooter. And on top of that, he shoots 42.4% from three-point land. That could be huge. That could be big tomorrow, too. And I'm taking Indiana to win this game. Yes, I grant you. However, I got some concerns. And here it is. As a team, Indiana's been shooting outstanding from the field at 51.4%. From three-point land, it's 35.9% for them. But as a team at the free throw line, they're only shooting 63.6%. And their highest free throw shooter is only 76.5%. Not very good. And as a team for Butler, they've been shooting 47.1% from the field. So if Indiana can get Purdue, can get Butler, if Indiana can get Butler to play their kind of basketball, shoot it from the field, they've got it won. If it turns into a three-ball contest, it's too close to call. If this game is decided at the free throw line, hand it to Butler, because Indiana is only shooting 63.6% from the free throw line, and at the free throw line for Butler, 75.8%. That's a big deal right there. Indiana coach Archie Miller said, we're coming off of a hard-fought victory over Louisville. We had to earn that one. If it worked for a couple of inches or one bad loss, we'd be in the top 20 or top 15 right now. And I grant you. And a lot of the Indiana fans are saying, we're not getting the respect that they deserve. And after beating Louisville, I think they're entitled to some respect. But let's see. But the one thing I want to see out of Indiana is 63.6% at the free throw line. If this game turns into a free throw, and if this game is decided at the free throw line, give it to Butler. If it turns into an old-fashioned Indiana type Bob Knight type game, give it to Indiana. If it's a three-ball contest, it's too close to call. But I'm going to go with Indiana to beat Butler. And as far as the other game of the Crossroads Classic, I am going to take, you know what? I'm going to go with Purdue. I'm going to take Purdue over Notre Dame. You've heard it here first, folks. And that's all there is to it. And now, there's one other game. There's a couple other things I want to talk about here. A couple more games, and then we're going to talk about the First Bracketology Report. So stay tuned. The next game I'm going to talk about, Rutgers against Seton Hall. As it stands right now, Rutgers is completely out of the NCAA tournament, and they've been having some struggles all year long. And I'll get to those in a second. Rutgers is coming off of a bad loss to Fordham. That's not very good. Seton Hall is coming off of a wild victory over Kentucky last Saturday. That was unbelievable. I mean, last Saturday, it took me about 2 hours to come back down to earth after a crazy Saturday. I hope this Saturday won't be as crazy. But anyway, for Rutgers, if you think about this, Eugene Marioni, he averages 15.8 points per game. He leads the team with the most rebounds with 9.2. The free throw shooting is not that good at 66.7%. He can shoot pretty good from the field at 48.2%. But if it's a three-ball contest, give it to him because he's a pretty good three-ball shooter at 43.5%. That could be very important to going down the road. Geo Baker. This is important too. He averages 14.6 points per game. However, he's only a 70% free throw shooter too. That's not very good for Rutgers. And Rutgers has been having struggles all season long. And as a team, they're shooting a pretty decent number at 42.7% from the field. But Seton Hall is a little bit better at 45.3%. And as the free throw line, if this turns into a free throw contest, I would not want to be either coach right now, because right now Seton Hall is only shooting 6% from the free throw line. Rutgers only 60.3. But if Rutgers can turn this into a three-ball contest, give it to Rutgers because they're shooting 35.5% from three-point land, while Seton Hall is only shooting 31.6. But let's think about it, though. I got two players on the Seton Hall watch list for tomorrow. Miles Powell, 2.3 rebounds per game. Now, wait a minute, back up. 23 points per game. That's huge. He may only average 2.4 assists per game and 3.2 rebounds per game. Another concern for Miles Powell. He only shoots 53.6% from the free throw line. That's not very good. Michael Nessie. He only averages 10.6 points per game. However, he does lead the team with the most rebounds at 5 rebounds per game. He's a 72.7% shooter from the field. He may only average 51.7% from the free throw line. But that could be huge, though. But like I said, if Rutgers can turn this into a three-ball contest, they have a shot. If this turns into a free throw contest, give it to Seton Hall. If this turns into a battle from the field, it's going to be a toss-up. But in the end, I'm going to go with Seton Hall because they have a lot more to play for. And I'm going to tell you this now. I just hope and pray for Rutgers that if they can pull this out of the fire, or pull this out of the bag, it'll be something. Bottom line. But I'm going to tell you this. It's going to get crazy. And there's a lot at stake for Seton Hall. According to Joe Lunardi of the ESPN Bracketology Report, he has Seton Hall as the next 4 out. Now, Seton Hall got a big win over Kentucky. But they need to get a couple of more good wins, and the Big East needs to get better. Because right now, the Big East is just weak. And I'm not just talking about Seton Hall, Villanova, and Providence. I'm talking about the whole conference. St. John's is the top dog in the Big East Conference at this moment. And that's all. I'm not going to go any further. All right. The big main event for Saturday. Number 4 Gonzaga, number 12 North Carolina. Woo, baby, that's going to be a barn burner. Gonzaga coach Mark Few has said, we have prepared our guys for North Carolina. We want to put the Tennessee loss behind us. And I'll tell you right now, Gonzaga is coming off of a very bad loss against Tennessee. North Carolina just destroyed UNC Wilmington 97-69 in their last game. And right now, as it stands right now, according to the latest bracketology report, Gonzaga would be a number 2 seed in the West, and they would get the Jackrabbits of South Dakota State. And as it stands right now for UNC, they would be a number 3 seed in the Midwest region, and they would get Old Dominion in the first round. I know it's way too early to be talking March Madness, but when I do my bracketology report, I'm not going to go too haywire. I'll worry about the haywireness when we get in towards mid-January or into early February. But I'm just going to give you a little idea of how it's going to go. But anyway, that bracketology report is going to be in a few minutes. Right now, I want to focus on Gonzaga and North Carolina. Now, like I said, Gonzaga is coming off of a bad loss to Tennessee. But if you stop and think about it, Gonzaga's got some big guys. I got 4 guys on the watch list for Gonzaga on Saturday. Rui Hachimura. He averages 22.2 points per game, but he only shoots 56.5% from the free throw. He shoots 56.5% from the field. The free throw line, 71%, that's pretty good. But if you need a 3-ball, turn to Hachimura because he can shoot 46.7% from three-point land. That's going to be very important. Zach Norville, he had 27, 28 points last time. His average is 17.6 points per game. That's huge. He can shoot 43.5% from the field. And on top of that, for Norville, the good thing is if you need somebody at the free throw line, he can be one of your go-to guys. He averages 83.3% from the free throw line. That could be huge. Brendan Clark. He's another guy on my watch list. He averages 16.9 points per game, 8.2 rebounds per game, baby. And he shoots 71.4% from the field. That's very important right there. Brandon Clark, you got Zach Norville, and you got Rui Hachimura. They could be the guys to watch out. But I got one more player I'm going to add to the watch list for Saturday night. Josh Perkins, 10.2 points per game, but he leads the team with the most assists with 8.2, and he only averages 3.2 rebounds per game. However, he's a 90% free throw shooter. And if I'm North Carolina, do not foul Perkins because he's almost Mr. Automatic at the free throw line. Gonzaga coach Mark Few said earlier in the week, we're going to prepare ourselves for North Carolina. We're going to try to put the Tennessee loss behind us. And I told my guys, we lost it, we got beat. That's all there is to it. Now this week's a new week, and maybe we can get some love. Maybe we can get something against UNC. North Carolina coach Roy Williams said, we're going to have our guys ready. We know Gonzaga is going to be playing mad because they got beat by Tennessee, one of the best teams in the SEC. But I'm going to say this now. Our guys will be ready. And I hope they are because I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to be a battle all the way to the end. And I got 3 players on my watch list that Gonzaga needs to think about. Cameron Johnson, he averages 15.7 points per game. That could be important right there. And he leads the team with the most rebounds with 5.4. And also, too, keep this in mind. He shoots 87.5% from the free throw line. That could be huge, too. And he shoots a pretty good 51.5% from the field. That's very important as well. And I'll get to those in a minute. Kobe White. He may only average 15.3 points per game. He shoots a very impressive 45.3% from the field and 81.3% from the free throw line. And he almost shoots 42% from three-point land. That could be important as well. Luke May. He's another guy on my watch list. 13.7 points per game and 9.3 rebounds per game. He leads the team with the most rebounds. I thought I said Johnson. It was my mistake. I messed up. And he's a very good 75.7% free throw shooter. That could be important too if you want to win a ball game like this. All right. Well, let's think about this for a minute. As a team, this game is literally almost going to be too close to call. Because if Gonzaga can get this, if Gonzaga can get this game if this game is decided in the field shooting, give it to Gonzaga because they average 52.3% as a team from the field. North Carolina only averages 49. If it's a free throw contest, it's going to be very close. Because like I said, as a team, Gonzaga averages 74.7% from the free throw line. North Carolina, 72.8. If this is a 3-ball contest, it's going to be close. This season, Gonzaga so far has been averaging 38.8% from three-point land. North Carolina has been averaging 35.3. That's very important too. I crunched the numbers, guys, and I'm not going to lie to you. This game is going to be close. I've got a feeling. Gonzaga is coming off of a loss, and UNC just destroyed UNC Wilmington. In a game like this, if it's this close, I've got to go with Gonzaga because they got some guys who can shoot the basketball. Not to take anything away from North Carolina, but I'm going to tell you now, I think Gonzaga is just a little bit better. Bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, bottom line. But I'm going to say this too. North Carolina, the game is in Cameron. The game is at the Dean Smith Center. So North Carolina could have the home crowd going for them. How will Gonzaga respond? Only time will tell that. But I'm going to say this too. This game's going to be close, but I'm going to go with Gonzaga because they're coming off of a loss and they're going to be coming in fired up. And I'm going to say this. It's going to be crazy come Saturday night. Okay. Now, that's all the games I'm going to talk about, but I want to talk about a couple of other things. Let's talk about the top two teams in the Big Ten. Michigan, Ohio State. The only loss for Ohio State was against Syracuse as part of the Big Ten ACC tournament. Coach Chris Holtmann said, we're going to have our guys back tomorrow. We're going to be ready to play. Now, Ohio State will be back in action tomorrow at 12 noon against Bucknell on the Big Ten Network. Coach Holtmann has said it was a long break we needed. I know our kids had to take final exams, but I'm going to tell you, we'll be back on the court ready tomorrow. We may be a little bit rusty at first because we've been on such a long break, but I want to see what these guys can do. I know we're playing Bucknell. They're 3-0 on the road, but I'm not taking that record lightly. Now, Bucknell may be 4-3 overall, but they're 3-0 on the road. I wouldn't take that lightly. But let's think about it, though. Caleb Wesson, 14.3 points per game. And he leads the team with 6.2 rebounds per game. That's very important, too. And he shoots almost 52% from the field, and he's a pretty good free throw shooter, 72.1%. He's already said, we're going to be ready for tomorrow. We'll be ready to go back We're ready to go back to work tomorrow and see what we can do. C.J. Jackson, let's think about this. He may only average 12.7 points per game, but he averages 3.1 assists per game, and he leads the team in that department. And he can shoot free throws too, 79.5%. That could be very important. Keyshawn Woods, he may only average 8.2 points per game, but he leads the team in assists with 3, and he also has 3.3 rebounds per game. And he's a very impressive 92.3% free throw shooter. If you want somebody at the line, Keyshawn Woods would be the guy I want. And as a team, Ohio State's been shooting 48.1% from the field. Overall, as a team at the free throw line, Ohio State's been pretty good at 74%. And in three-point land, 37.7%. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning these numbers is because Michigan and Ohio State only have one meeting at the Chrysler Arena in Ann Arbor, and I think that's going to be on January 22nd, I do believe. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I'll look at the schedule, and I'll get that in the information. But now let's think about Michigan. They are undefeated right now. They don't have a loss to their name. Now, Michigan faces Western Michigan tomorrow. They'll be in action. Ingas Bredezakis, 17 points per game. Very impressive. 5.2 rebounds per game. He leads the team in that department. And he is also a very impressive. He shoots almost 52% from the field himself, and he's a very excellent 81% free throw shooter. Jordan Poole, he may only average 13.3 points per game. He shoots 51.1% from the field, and he's an 80% free throw shooter. Very important. John Teske, he may only average 8.8 points per game, but he leads the team with the most rebounds with 6.5. Xavier Simpson, he leads the team in assists. 6.5 points per game and 6.1 assists per game. That can be huge as well. Just a second here. Sorry about that. I had to take a little swig of pop there, but I'm now back with you. But anyway, as a team for Michigan, they shoot 46.8% from the field. That could be huge going into January into that meeting because I'll get to that. Let me come back to that. I'll come back to the Ohio State-Michigan thing in a second. At the free throw line for Michigan, they got some work to do. As a team, they're only shooting 66% from the free throw line. From three-point land, 36.6%. Now, that's pretty good. I grant you. But I will say this, though. Ohio State and Michigan only face off once. They only have one meeting all season. And that will be at the Chrysler Arena in Ann Arbor. Ohio State, as a team, if you stop and think about it for a second, they shoot 48.1% from the field. Michigan, 46.8%. If it comes down to the game in the field, it's going to be too close to call. If this game is decided from three-point land, slight edge Ohio State, 37.7% to Michigan's 36.6%. That game will be too close to call. What Michigan needs to avoid, and this is important, Michigan would have to avoid a free throw contest with Ohio State. Ohio State shoots 74% from the free throw line. Michigan only shoots 66%. That's not good as a team. And there's going to be some struggles there. And I know the Michigan-Ohio State game is not going to be until like January 22nd. But I'm going to say this, though. There's a long way to go. Ohio State coach Chris Holtmann has said we're going to take this one game at a time until we get there. Michigan coach John Beilein has already said, I'll have my guys ready. They're always ready for anything. But I'm going to tell you right now, we're taking it a little easy, but come conference play, I'm going to be overworking them if I need to. And Coach Holtmann's already said the same thing from the Ohio State standpoint. And I'm going to tell you this. One meeting, January 22nd, between Michigan and Ohio State. I think it's either Tuesday or Wednesday, and that game is going to be at the Chrysler Arena in Ann Arbor. And let me tell you, that is not a fun place to play if you're a visiting team. Okay. Now, it is now time for my first bracketology report. Now, what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to bore you with seeds 1 through 16 from each region. I'm not going to bore you with that. But what I do want to do, I'm going to go through the top 4 seedings. The top 4 seeds in each region. That's in numerical order 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the 4 number 1 seeds as it stands right now are Kansas, Virginia, Duke, Michigan. Now, Michigan, they got there courtesy of Gonzaga getting beat. And I'm going to tell you right now, Michigan's got a great basketball team. And that's all there is to it, folks. That's all there is to it. Duke. The Duke Blue Devils, they got Zion Williamson, and they got 4 diaper dandies, in the words of my old buddy Dickie V. And I'm telling you right now, Mike Krzyzewski's already said, I got my guys ready for anything. I know Duke doesn't play tomorrow. Virginia. You know how the Virginia Cavaliers are. You know how the Virginia is. They pride themselves by playing defense at all costs. And now my thing is, Virginia, their mindset is the first to 50 wins. Now, I know they've scored like 75 to 80 in their last few games. Kansas, a very dangerous team. The old Tomahawk, Jayhawk, and the Jayhawks, they're always very dangerous, and they're always a nightmare. And you know how Coach Bill Self is. Bill Self has already said, I got one of the best teams out of the Big 12. We've been the top dogs of the Big 12 for like the up-teen times, for the most up-teen years. And we're not going to give up anytime soon. Now, the 2 seeds, as it stands right now. Nevada, out of the West Coast Conference. They can be a nightmare. Gonzaga dropped to a 2 seed after that loss to Tennessee. Mark Few has said, I was disappointed in our team, but I told him to move on. The next 2 seed, Michigan State. Nick Ward is a very big dude, and it would scare me to death. Nick Ward's always dangerous, and Coach Tom Izzo has already said, our guys are always very tough. That's all there is to it. Tennessee is the last 2 seed. Coach Jeremy Pruitt has said, our program has really turned around. And I'm going to tell you now, the men's basketball team is getting much, much better. They're playing much harder than they have in the past. We beat Gonzaga, and we have every right to be that. We earned that 2 seed as it stands right now. The 3 seeds in the NCAA tournament would be Auburn. I know Auburn's more of a football school than a basketball school. Bruce Pearl has turned Auburn around. Wisconsin. Ethan Happ and Demetric Trice, two of the most dangerous guys out of the Big Ten. And Texas Tech, the other team out of the Big 12. They can be dangerous too. North Carolina, Luke Mail. Well, let me back up here. Let me think here. I have to kind of go back through the names here. Luke Mail, he's dangerous. Kobe White, Cameron Johnson. Sorry about the little mishap there, a little faux pas there, but I had to make sure I had everything on the up and up. And Roy Williams has said, I've got one of the best teams out of the ACC. If we can knock off Duke, we'll be sitting really pretty. The 4 seeds, if the tournament were to start, would be Ohio State. They would be a 4 seed. They moved up from a 5 to a 4 after a fantastic week. Virginia Tech, they dropped to a 4 seed after a bad loss. Florida State, despite the fact they beat UConn 79-71, they dropped. Villanova, they're coming off of a bad loss. Head coach Jay Williams said, we couldn't get in. We got humiliated against Penn. We got humiliated against the Quakers, and we just played awful. I mean, we got a team. We got a team who can play better than that. And we should have played better against Penn, and we didn't. I think a lot of our guys were thinking ahead to Kansas. And he's right. Let's think about this. Everybody knew Villanova, Kansas would be a big game. I think they were looking ahead. I really do. My thing is, there's still a long way to go. But now, those are your first 4 seeds. Those are the 16 teams that I wanted to talk about basically from the first 4 seeds of the NCAA tournament. Now, let's focus on the first 4 matchups as it stands right now. Some of these teams, we got the last 4 in, first 4 out, but I want to focus on the first 4 matchups. The first 4 matchups are from the 16 seeds, Stephen F. Austin versus Texas Southern. The winner of that game would get Kansas in the first round. Oh, I would not want to have to play the Jayhawks right now. The other 16-seeded matchups would be Norfolk State versus St. Francis, Pennsylvania. The winner would get Michigan in the first round. Yikes. And now, these are your 11-seeded matchups. 11-seeded UCLA versus San Francisco. The winner gets Cincinnati in the first round. And the Bearcats are playing tough right now. And the other first 4 matchup, and the last but not least, would be Minnesota versus UCF. The winner of that game would get Oklahoma. And right now, Oklahoma is playing excellent basketball right now. Oklahoma coach Lon Kruger has said, our team is getting much better and better. I think this year we can compete for the Big 12 title. And I'm going to be fair with you. I got a team this time. And it was proven against Notre Dame. And my thing is, no matter how this turns out, I want to take it one game at a time. And that's all you can do. Now, everybody's been wondering how the whole thing shapes up. According to ESPN bracketologist Joe Lunardi, the last 4 buys into the field are Texas. They're coming off of a big win over Purdue last Saturday. Louisville, they're coming off of a bad loss to Indiana. Arizona, they've been having some struggles. Creighton, they're playing Wisconsin Green Bay. I'm not sure if they won that game yet or not. And according to Joe Lunardi, the last 4 into the field are UCLA. That huge victory over Notre Dame helps, but they need to get they need to dominate the Pac-12. UCF, they've had some struggles. The Minnesota Golden Gophers, if they can get some huge wins in the Big Ten, I think they can get in. I think they can move themselves up a little bit further. And San Francisco, there's been some questions about them. According to Joe Lunardi, the first 4 out are LSU out of the SEC, Utah State, the Washington Huskies. The Huskies almost knocked off Gonzaga. Had the Huskies knocked off Gonzaga the week before Gonzaga had to play Tennessee, They would probably be in barely. And the one team that surprises me from the first 4 out, West Virginia. Bob Huggins. Oh, Huggy Bear, after that game against Florida a couple weeks ago, he was not a very happy man. And I can understand why. He said there's some players on there that need to grow up. He didn't mention names, and he was very mellow about it. But I think his words spoke very loudly. And according to Joe Lunardi, the next 4 out, there's 2 on here I think that should be in. Clemson, I agree. Clemson, cross them out. They're in the next 4 out. I'll give them that. Northwestern, I think they're probably a little bit higher. I think they should be a little bit lower. But the 2 I will not agree on is Seton Hall. I would put Seton Hall in after that upset victory over number 9 Kentucky last Saturday. And Seton Hall is going to prove to Joe Lunardi that they should be in if they can humiliate Rutgers. And Furman's in the top 25, and Lunardi's got him as the next 4 out? You got to be kidding me. No way. Furman deserves some respect, as far as I'm concerned. I agree. Now, I agree with him on Clemson. Now, as far as the next 4 out, I'll agree with Lunardi on that. Clemson, I'll give him. Northwestern, I think they're a little bit higher. But Seton Hall and Furman, no. Not on your life. And as far as the last 4 buys, as far as Lunardi goes, I agree with him. Texas, Louisville, Arizona, Creighton. I'll agree with him on all 4 of them. The last 4 in, I'll give him that. First 4 out, I'll give him that. But I think West Virginia should be next 4 out because they don't have a team right now. I think Northwestern should be moved out of the way and put West Virginia there. That's how I feel. Bottom line. And everybody's noticed, according to the bracket breakdown, if you look at by conference, so far, everybody's thinking the ACC dominates. It's been the Big Ten that's been dominating the news, and in the first bracketology report. And I'm going to tell you right now, we have 10 teams. If the tournament were to start tomorrow, there would be 10 teams that would be in. Ohio State. I have Ohio State down, and I'm going to tell you right now, if the tournament were to start tomorrow, they would face New Mexico State. And this is the same New Mexico State team that almost knocked off Kansas. Think about that. Michigan, and I've already said earlier, they would get the winner of the Norfolk State San Francisco game in a first 4 matchup. Wisconsin, they're in the field. And they would get Vermont in the first round in the West region. Now, Ohio State would face New Mexico State in the West region in the first round. Michigan, it's almost being home. They would be in the South region and they would have a first round game here in Columbus. That's a bunch of garbage. Anyway. Minnesota, they would be an 11 seed. And like I said a few minutes ago, they would face UCF in a first 4 game. Michigan State, they would be a 2 seed. And they would face Northern Kentucky. Purdue, they would face the Oregon Ducks in the first round in the Midwest region. Nebraska, they would get Davidson in the first round in the Midwest region. Iowa, the Hawkeyes have had some struggles. They would get TCU in the first round in the East region. That's huge. Because TCU, the basketball team's getting better. Indiana, they would be in. They would be a 5 seed against Lipscomb in the first round of the West region. And Maryland would be in. And they would get St. John's in the first round. That is important too because St. John's is sitting at the top of the Big East right now. And at the moment, the Big East is just weak. And I'll address that another time. And now, the ACC. This is the one that I'm always interested in. And according to Joe Lunardi, Duke would be the number 1 seed and they would get Rider in the first round in the East region. Syracuse, they would face Florida in the first round. in the Midwest region. I'm not going to do the regions. Syracuse would get Florida in the first round in the East region. That is correct. And you've already heard me say North Carolina would get Old Dominion in the first round in the Midwest region. Florida State would be a number 4 seed, and they would get Georgia State in the first round in the Midwest region. Virginia, they would face Lehigh in the first round. And remember last year when UMBC upset number 1 Virginia, when UMBC was a 16 seed? My heart goes out to Lehigh because Virginia still has a lot to prove to me in the West region, and that would be a West region in the first round. Number 10 Louisville, they would get Kansas State in the first round in the in the West region. That's huge. Number 9 NC State would get Iowa State out of the Big 12 in the first round. And last but not least, Virginia Tech would get Yale out of the Ivy League in the first round in the South region. That would be important too. So folks, there you have my first bracketology report. I'm not going to get too totally out of control with this until it gets closer to tournament time. I'm going to do a little bit more with the bracketology report come mid-January or even early February. That's when it's going to start getting really serious. Now, I know the first of the year we start conference play, but let's see what happens first in conference play before we get completely out of control with it. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for my closing thoughts on this night. But instead of doing a closing thought, I'm going to close out the show with a song to pay tribute to the fine state of Indiana. And Jim Neighbors, I hope you're listening up there in heaven, my friend, because this is just for you. And this is to pay tribute to Purdue, Notre Dame, Indiana, and Butler. And all Hoosier fans, and all Hoosier basketball fans, and Hoosier race fans know this song by heart. Back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see the gleaming candlelight still burning bright through the sycamores for me. The new Montage, it's all its fragrance through the fields I used to know. When I dream about the moonlight on the warm patch, how I'd love for my Indiana home. Well, folks, that's going to do for tonight's show. I want to thank you guys so much for being with me here tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night between 11:30 and midnight, I promise you, for the college basketball wrap-up show. Thank you so much for being with me here tonight. You guys have a great night. Thank you so much for being with me, and God bless. Good night, everybody, and thank you.